Happy Juneteenth, everybody, and welcome to the group chat on Two-Way, where our ethos is peace, love, and understanding, and the presumption of grace for all. I'm Batya Ungar-Sargon, and I am joined by my fabulous co-hosts. We've got progressive Nina Turner, conservative Emma Jo Morris, libertarian Robby Soave, and moderate Democrat Dan Turrentine. And we have got all of you, our Two-Way community, with the nicest, kindest chat, not just on Two-Way, but on the entire internet. You see this big smile? This is from the nice chat. So let's keep that going because I feel some type of way about it. I feel super smug about it. Let's keep that nice chat going. Okay, so we're going to be discussing the big news of the day, and throughout the hour, we're going to be bringing you guys in. If you want to join the conversation and you're watching on the Two-Way platform, raise your digital hand, and we're going to do our best to bring in as many people as possible. So the big story today is Iran, of course. We are sort of at the will he or won't he stage of things. For the past week, Israel and Iran have been trading airstrikes. The Israelis attacked Iran on Thursday, striking at the Islamic regime's nuclear sites, and Iran has responded with a series of strikes against Israel. As everybody knows, the latest hit Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, causing severe damage, although by the grace of God, very few injuries. And the Israelis have vowed to intensify their attacks on government targets in Tehran in response. Our involvement as Americans has so far been defensive support of Israel. So we've lent intelligence and we've lent refueling support. But President Trump has, as of this moment, refused himself to join in the attacks on Iran, while also reiterating his long-held belief that Iran must not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. It was reported that Trump actually nixed an Israeli plan to assassinate the Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran's supreme leader, while the president continues to demand what he called in a post to Truth Social, unconditional surrender. The New York Times also reported that officials from Iran's foreign ministry are keen for a meeting with Trump, despite the fact that Khomeini continues to tweet defiantly from his bunker. Now, complicating matters, there's a nuclear site that many believe, although not everybody, that the Israelis cannot themselves penetrate, the Fordo site, which is deep underground, and that it would require American bunker busters. So the question has become whether President Trump will give Israel those bunker busters or will use them ourselves to attack Fordo. Axios has reported that the president has asked three main questions about these bunker busters and a potential U.S. strike. He wants to know if they will succeed. He wants to know if they will result in escalation, and he wants to know if they are truly necessary to what he considers to be the goal of preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Meanwhile, some of the biggest MAGA influencers have come out against any assistance to Israel in this fight. We're definitely going to get to that. The brawling between the neocons like Ted Cruz and Mark Levin versus Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And yet, despite the prevalence of this narrative that Iran is splitting the MAGA base, most of the polling shows that not just Republicans, but the entire country has a very similar feeling about Iran, specifically when it comes to whether they should be allowed to have a nuke. So let's look at number two. Here's some polling from CNN that found that 79% of all US adults oppose Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon, like the president. And that includes 83% of the GOP voters, 79% of independents, and 79% of Democrats. And meanwhile, let's look at element one here. JL Partners found that an overwhelming number of self-described MAGA Republicans, 65%, would back US strikes against Iran. Most recently, and now we're getting up to date, and then we're going to start the discussion, Caroline Leavitt today, just at 1 p.m., announced that Trump would not be making this decision right away, despite the fact that I guess many nations, if not the entire globe, is at the edge of their seats, but that he would take 2 weeks to make his decision, or that he would make it within 2 weeks. So let's look at number four here.
Now, regarding the ongoing situation in Iran, I know there has been a lot of speculation amongst all of you in the media regarding the president's decision-making and whether or not the United States will be directly involved. In light of that news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today.
Okay, so there we have it. He's going to allow himself a little breathing room to make this decision. So let's jump into it. Let's start with a show of hands. So between the five of us, who agrees? Do we all agree that Iran should not be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon? Does everybody agree with that? All five of us? So Nina, you think that it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon?
I don't think it's okay for the only nation to drop an atomic bomb on other people in the history of the world to dictate who can and who cannot have.
Okay, awesome. So we are actually not all in agreement about this. We're definitely going to come back to that, Nina. Robby, I want to start with you, the libertarian. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well has Trump handled the situation, and what should he do next?
So I think if we compare Trump to, like, I guess all presidents in my lifetime, I would give him a 10, because all presidents in my lifetime have been far more hawkish than I would like. If I'm just grading him in a vacuum, I would give him like a 6.72, repeating something like that. That was very precise of me. Look, it is clear that every president, when elected, runs, so many of them in my lifetime have run on a platform of being less interventionist, often in the Middle East specifically, because that's where the American people are. And that's never been where GOP elites are, or really the elites in both parties. Trump said something a lot different when he was running, although so did Barack Obama, and we see how that turned out. When Trump was running, I rewatched this clip, probably a lot of people have, in 2016, he called the Iraq War a catastrophic mistake. That was a big part of his appeal, frankly, and foreign policy is the area where I have agreed with Trump more than probably any other set of issues. So I am glad he is taking his time. Why rush? There is no reason to rush. Just because Israel says now is the time, they're days away. I'm sorry, they've been saying that for years and years and years and years. Israel does not get to determine whether the US goes to war with another sovereign nation. The American government does. And the last thing I'll say in this, not just Trump, but Congress should be weighing in. This would be a declaration of war on another country. There's no way, in my view, to get around the fact that Congress would need to vote on whether to do this. They don't want to do that, because they don't want to be held accountable for it if it turns out to be unpopular and they do it anyway. But this is not Trump's decision alone to make. However, if Congress is going to let him make it, I'm glad he's taking his time to think through whether this would really be a good
Robby,
thing.
were you, sorry, I couldn't see your little box. Were you a no on Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon?
I was with Nina.
You're with
The way
Nina.
you phrased it, should we stop them from getting a nuclear weapon? I did not raise my hand for that. In a perfect world, do I think they should have a nuclear weapon? No, but what am I willing to do to prevent them? I think might be less than you or Emma or Dan, but we'll see.
Okay, so Dan, where are the Democrats at on this? Because we're going to get to Emma, we're going to get to Nina, we're going to get to the divides, but I really feel that there's been very little by way of commentary or the usual suspects or any sort of feeling from Democrats that there's something here for them to be seizing on. Where are the Democrats on this, and why have we not heard so much from them?
Well, I think it's not just Democrats. I think you haven't heard from most members of Congress because this is so jarring. It's so new. You think about the Iraq War, from when Dick Cheney gave that speech at the VFW in late August of 2002 until George W. Bush, pulled the trigger, so to speak, in March of 2003. The country debated this during, congressional debates, every talk show, editorial page. For months and months and months, we debated, should we do this? This is not even 7 days old. And there's the conversation of, should we assist Israel with bunker busters to try to take out Fedoro? But there's the much bigger conversation of then what? And I think it's not just Democrats, moderates, or progressives. It's Republicans who are all trying to, in real time, in a very quick way, figure this out, because Israel has found so much success so fast that I think it's stunned everybody. And I think Israel is now like, we have a chance to not just take out their nuclear program, but the other big question is, do they take out the regime? And then what comes after it? Who owns it? Who protects it? Who funds it? I imagine they would need our help. So I think Trump is right to take his time, but just as Trump is right to take his time, I think Democrats and Republicans are wise to be very careful what you say and try to think this through.
Dan, scale of 1 to 10, how good is Trump doing? 1 to 10, did I say that?
Yeah, I'm going to say a 5, just because I think his patience and caution is right. But I also think one of his problems is he jumped out a couple of days ago when Israel was really having success and started saying stuff like, we, the US, control the skies. We're going to, we are a part of this. We might have to do this. And I think now the momentum got so far down the tracks that now he's starting to try to pull it back to say, give me time. I don't want to have to make this decision quickly.
Emma, this narrative has really taken hold that there's a split in the MAGA world over this. I want to play something for you. Tucker Carlson called Trump complicit in his newsletter, demanding that Trump drop Israel, but he then apparently sort of called Trump to apologize, according to the president, after the president tweeted, "Someone please explain to Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon." I want you to react to this video of the president relaying this conversation he had with Tucker Carlson. So let's watch element 3.
Seeing the Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz interview, it seems like this issue on whether or not the United States should strike is kind of dividing a lot of your supporters.
No, my supporters are for me. My supporters are America first. They make America great again. My supporters don't want to see Iran have a nuclear weapon. Tucker's a nice guy. He called and apologized the other day because he thought he said things that were a little bit too strong, and I appreciated that. And Ted Cruz is a nice guy. I mean, he's been with me for a long time. I'd say once the race was over, he's been with me ever since, right? But very simple. If they think that it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, then they should oppose me, but nobody thinks it's okay.
So Emma, is MAGA split over this?
Yeah, I don't think MAGA is split over this. I think so. Like this is the thing that Tucker is on and Bannon too. And don't get me wrong, like especially Bannon. Like I have insane respect for Bannon. He played a huge role in my career personally, and I just personally really like him and think he's absolutely brilliant. This is not shade, but people are saying, "Oh, Israel's dragging the U.S. into a war. It's another forever war." Freaking out. It's Iraq. First of all, okay, Israel is doing the war, but Trump was the one who has said, even before he was in politics, that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. He has been saying that for his entire political career and before. So they were trying to do a deal. Iran was not cooperating with that deal. They were still obviously pursuing a nuclear program. And now Trump is in the position where he can either abandon what he has been saying forever. And honestly, I mean, there's no face to save in that. Or he can react to them refusing to go along with what he's saying. And in this circumstance, actually, I feel like Trump is actually kind of getting out with like less exposure than he necessarily could have, because Israel is actually the one conducting this whole thing. And not only are they conducting it for him, or just conducting it in general on behalf, let's say, of the West, they're doing it with this incredible precision. Their intelligence is we've never even seen anything like it. I mean, they had all the guys in the Air Force in a room together because they like intercepted communication and then killed them all in one place. I mean, the level of skill that we've seen from Israel in this has been remarkable. I don't know that the United States even has a level of intelligence to do the same thing. And Trump's word gets kept. So that's number one. And number two, just super quick, people are blurring the line between not allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon and regime change.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Trump is about to do a regime change situation. That would be insane. He knows that would be insane. And he thinks about this with a lot of sophistication. And he's shown that over and over again, that his judgment on this is very restrained, actually, and very thoughtful. There's a huge difference between making them incapable of having weapons and taking out the regime. The regime is just not the Ayatollah, or it's just not what this is a 40-year regime that has people top to bottom. There may be thousands and tens of thousands of people in the regime. He's not doing Iraq. And I don't think he's ever even gestured toward that. I don't know why the MAGA people are going there.
Well, because you have to. If you take out the nuclear program, but the people who have been hell-bent on getting it, the leadership of Iran has been focused like singly on attaining a nuclear weapon to go after Israel or to be a deterrent. How do you leave them in place?
What do you
And
mean? You leave them,
that's the challenge.
you leave them to govern the place, but they have the mechanisms that they've been governing domestically in place, but they don't have nukes that they can shoot out.
Well, but they're going to, do you not think they won't resume trying to get it the next day?
I mean, if all of their scientists are dead, their entire military leadership is dead, and their facilities are in ashes, they will try, but we'll be having this conversation again in another 40 years.
Do you think,
Nina,
do you think Israel believes they need to go?
I don't know what Israel believes. I don't live there.
Nina, let's get you in here. I hear what you're saying, like that there's this sort of moral credibility question. We're the only ones who ever used a nuke policing other people. But what about our government's responsibility to protect us from a government that really doesn't like us that much and seems to want to get the capability at some point down the road, if it's not tomorrow, then in 5 years, that could harm American civilians? Make the case to us.
I don't want to conflate all of those things. Yeah, some people hate the United States of America. We hate some other. We have done more, been involved in many regime changes, which is we don't have the right to tell a sovereign nation who should be and who should not be their leaders. We need to get our stuff right here at home before we start going and tracing in other people's backyards. Israel attacked Iran. In this moment, whether they attacked them. So now they're attacking back. We cannot war our way to peace. Yes, the United States of America is the only nation to drop a nuclear weapon on another nation. We're talking about this as if there won't be some collateral damage. There's already collateral damage over there if we send our troops. I've not met one person so far, and I've been out all across this country, but even today, as we celebrate Juneteenth, I've not had one person come up to me and say, hey, Senator Turner, guess what? I would love for my loved one to go to war, because nobody wants that knock at the door that their loved one has been hurt, has been maimed, has been killed. And I agree, God forbid, Representative Thomas Massey and Representative Ro Khanna introduced a resolution making it very clear. This is not, the Congress has a constitutional duty not to allow this president to go into war without coming before them first. And Representative Thomas Massey, who I happen to agree with in this case, this is not our war. And even if it were our war, and I'm quoting him, the president of the United States of America, no matter who it is, must come before the Congress to declare war. My last point for now, why are we so giddy? And I mean the collective we, not us here today, but why are people so giddy about going to war? We cannot war our way to peace. And so my concern is sovereign nations have a right. I would wish that nobody had nuclear weapons. Let me just say that right now. So I couldn't raise my hand. Sometimes when we ask these questions, it's not just black and white. Mm-hmm. I want no nation to have weapons of mass destruction, because guess what? If this is amped up too far, we get into WW3. And then nobody wins.
Robby, I want you to weigh in here, because it's so amazing to see you and Nina have so much common ground. But I want to just narrow what I want you to say, what you want to say, but also I want you to respond to something Emma said, which is Israel's doing all the work, right? Like, as of right now, we've been asked for fuel and intelligence. So like they're destroying the ability of a nation that hates us. Like, so the narrative that Israel's dragging us into war, why is that the narrative rather than that Israel's actually doing us a massive favor and asking for getting very little in return? They probably want us to bomb Fordo, and they'll be upset if Trump doesn't. But why is that the narrative? So tell us what you were going to say, and then respond to that point too.
Sure. So to add to Nina's point, so I see it less in moral terms. If I thought Iran was going to develop a nuclear weapon and then immediately nuke Israel, I would advocate taking them out. Like I actually would. But China has a nuke and hasn't nuked Taiwan, and North Korea hasn't nuked South Korea, and Pakistan hasn't nuked India, and Russia has not nuked Ukraine, even though they're in a war with Ukraine and they're invading them. Like the lived experience of nuclear weapons is that you get it and then it gives you some protection and you don't use it. I think the leadership of North Korea is just as insane. If you're trying to tell some story that the people who run Iran are like crazier or want to die more or willing to die more than the crazy despotic regimes of other nations, that just rings hollow to me. I don't really believe it, especially when compared with North Korea.
But Robby, I'm Roman Catholic, but a lot of Jews would tell you that they've been threatened in the past and not taken it seriously, and it hasn't turned out very well. So the
Well,
Jewish
they've been
people
attacked.
just
They're at war, but they've not been nuked. There's a special.
well, they went through a Holocaust.
Well, right, and we took out all those. The nukes are a special case. I don't think they're going to be. I just don't think they're going to be used. Now, if I could stop them through, I'm willing to stop them through diplomacy. I think we should engage with them and try to prevent them from having it. It's like, at what cost am I willing to bear to stop them? I'm not willing to bear the cost of going to war with them and possibly killing their leaders to be replaced by worse leaders. To the point you wanted me to respond. The Israel point. Well, look, I am not going to constrain Israel's behavior at all. I am not for. I mean, I'm not on the left. I'm a libertarian. I don't want like international law to constrain Israel. Israel should do what Israel thinks it needs to do to protect its people, its borders, etc. That Israel's business is Israel's. I am not someone trying to obstruct them in any way. I would cut off foreign aid to them as I would cut off foreign aid to every other nation on earth, because I think American tax dollars should be spent in America. They can buy our weapons just like everyone else. I'm fine with all of that. But I think they are trying to drag us into the war to the extent that, I mean, you hear their statements, right? They tried to say that Trump's negotiations with Iran were a diversionary tactic, and that was part of the strikes against Iran, and they invited the U.S. to take a greater involvement. It seems to me like their messaging us is to make Trump feel morally obligated to be more involved in this, and I don't appreciate that, because this is a decision the U.S. government and the Congress, to emphasize again, should make.
Let's bring it. Go ahead, Nina, and we're going to bring in David.
David, the majority of the American people do not want this. So do we get a say? Or is it only Israel that gets a say?
Right. So the polling is very interesting on this, because on the one hand, Americans really don't, they prefer, about 69%, I think, prefer that President Trump try negotiations first, but they are very clear that 80%, and this is totally bipartisan, that they do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
Those are two different points, though. And I think those are two different points. One is, do you want us to go to war? 64% of voters say keep America out of the war. That's very important to them. And it's 71% of those people are Republicans. So now, whether or not we want Iran to have
a weapon,
that's a different question from American people. Do you want to see your sons and daughters and family and friends go?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely.
But that's all that we're only,
but we're not right, exactly.
War yet. Like all reality is right now is a debate about weapons.
Well, but I think the challenge is, it has always been our policy that they cannot have a weapon.
Yeah.
And I think we would all agree Iran is weaker today than they have been in 40 years. Hamas has been badly hurt. Hezbollah has been badly hurt. The Iranian air defenses have basically been destroyed. Their military leadership has been assassinated.
Right.
So the challenge is, we've done espionage and kind of cyber attacks and all these things, and it's delayed their development of the weapon. But we always knew at some point we were going to get to the end of the road where the delay tactics had stopped working and Iran was kind of imminent on the bomb. Israel believes it's imminent. Tulsi Gabbard says it's not. And I think the thing is, this is perhaps the moment that both countries feel to go for the kill, so to speak, to take the program out.
But that's all we're talking about. We're not talking about dismantling the Iranian government.
Well,
there's a bit of a Mott and a Bailey.
Some people certainly
here.
are. Ted Cruz was in the conversation with Tucker.
Israel is.
Okay, all right. Let's bring in David Soroka. David, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and what your point of view is on this.
So I'm in Los Angeles, California. No relation to the Soroka Hospital. Just similar name, but maybe a long lost relative. My point kind of more is on the starting point of where you think these countries are coming from. I think kind of like Robby's point of view is they wouldn't use a nuke, or they wouldn't have like these certain ulterior motives to their comments and some things like that. And I think that the main people that kind of push that has been kind of the Jeffrey Sachs, the John Mearsheimers, more people kind of that have that point of view. The way that I see it is, it's kind of been, all their points of view has been wrong from the beginning. They said, and Trump's kind of calling them out. They said for a long time, I've been watching a long time, that they just want peace. They want stability. Russia just wants peace. Their issues with NATO. Iran's issue is just with the way that they've been handling the Palestinian issue. And I think Trump kind of called them out on it in the beginning of his presidency and saying, let me talk to them and have peace. Let me see what they want. On Tucker Carlson show, when he just had Jeffrey Sachs, this was something that was specifically brought up where Jeffrey Sachs said they were willing to accept a deal with, Russia was willing to accept a deal with no NATO encroachment, and other specific things. Trump pretty much offered all that to him, and Putin said no. With Iran, he did a 60-day term for peace, kind of even postured more for it. And and Iran kind of said, no, we're not dealing with that. So kind of that point of view, they've been just called out on their bluff as saying, this is what we want. And they said no. The second side of it is when you ultimately appease them and say, you know what, we'll give you what you want, they just use that and kind of play with it. And then you take the actual war side of it, they make a bunch of predictions and they say, oh, Israel goes to war with Hezbollah, it's gonna get catastrophic for Israel. They go to war with Hamas, it's gonna be catastrophic for Israel. Russia goes to war with Ukraine, it's gonna be catastrophic for Ukraine. All of these have been kind of proven to be wrong. They've been recently saying, everyone's been saying, Israel's gonna go to war with Iran, it's gonna be catastrophic for Israel. All of them has kind of been wrong. So we could talk about previous wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, all these other wars, Libya. All of those have been catastrophic. But it seems like all their points on this few conflicts have just been completely wrong. And it seems like they just get away with continuously making these predictions, making these claims of what they want. And no matter what happens, they double down on it and say, no, they just want peace. No, they just want a nuclear weapon, or to have everything capable of having a nuclear weapon just as a deterrent. We know really they would never use it, but it's just a deterrent. So it kind of seems like they say one thing, reality happens, people offer them something, and then they go a different direction the second they get it.
Yeah, it's a great question, David. Thank you so much. I want to hear Robby and then Nina on this. Okay, you guys are both on that. It would be better if they didn't have a weapon, but what are we willing to do to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon? But it does seem like when, they are very good at taking advantage of people who approach them in a more conciliatory way. Trump tried for 60 days. I mean, he really did not want to go to war. And I think he still does not want to go to war. I think he's still, I mean, my money's on him not actually bombing Fordo. I think he's just too anti-war. But at the same time, how do you respond to David's point that it does seem like, you become a bit of a patsy at some point, believing these people?
Well, I don't think we have to believe them or trust in their goodwill. But I would actually, I guess I disagree with David there. I think if I think back to the history of our battles or regime changes or conflicts over the past several decades, I think I mostly come to the conclusion that the people who are on the other side of the argument, from Mearsheimer and Sachs and those people, made promises or predictions about how things would turn out that ended up being wrong or totally wrong. Look, I don't think we should be naive about Iran. If there are ways to stop them or encourage them not to get a nuclear weapon, those are worth pursuing. I largely am glad that Trump has chosen the diplomatic pathway. It is okay to threaten violence if you're not getting your way to some degree. And it is also okay for Israel to undertake policies in its own self-defense, independent of us. I don't want to constrain their behavior. I am just saying, if we are going to get involved, a debate must take place, and it must take place cognizant of the fact that all of our previous efforts, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, we have buyer's remorse on every single other one in the region. Buyer's remorse every single time. That tells me something. I don't know the future. Could it work out differently this time? Could it be we took out the Ayatollah and there's a popular uprising and we get a more democratic, more friendly government? I guess it could happen. I hope what happens in Syria, even though the person in charge of it is now a former ISIS affiliate, I hope it becomes the case that this is a cool pro-Western guy who wants to hang around with Trump. Look, I hope that happens. I am not rooting against it. I'm rooting for it. I just have to, balance what are the most likely outcomes and then calibrate what I think we should do, or how much I am willing to do, or have my taxpayer dollars put toward to orchestrate that outcome. And I'm sitting back here and thinking, I would not vote to get the U.S. more involved based on what I know. Other people can conclude otherwise, but that's where I'm at.
Okay, let's hear from Nina, and then Emma, I want you to respond.
Yeah,
Can I just respond real quickly?
Yeah, go ahead. Real quick, David.
I, I would just say that the people that are saying a lot of these things, like specifically John Mearsheimer, Jeffrey Sachs, I would even throw Tucker Carlson in there. They aren't, their issue isn't with the US involvement. Their issue is with Israel. They specifically state they don't believe Israel should be doing this. So it's not even about I completely understand the US side of the argument. US boots should definitely not be in the ground. Regime change is a very risky move no matter what country you're doing in. But their issue is not with the US. Their
That's a
issue
great
is with
point.
Israel from the
Actually,
beginning.
David, I had not thought about that. That's a really interesting point. Nina.
I mean, we're just in a cycle of revenge right now. I mean, I agree with much of what Robby had to say on this issue, so he already said it. So let me just add this cycle of revenge, this human nature. I want to work towards peace. Now, should nations have weapons to protect themselves? Yeah, only because human nature can be vicious, which is unfortunate too. But this cycle of revenge only gets us more and more and more revenge. What I do not want to have happen is American soldiers having to go and fight an amped up war that has really nothing to do with the United States of America. I don't want American families to get a knock at the door. So I can't just cavalierly say that this is okay. I'm glad that the president is taking his time. And Batya, I hope that he is more pro peace and pro being diplomatic than he is to rush into a war where other people's loved ones are going to be hurt. We're missing that. Also, we always have a whole lot of money for war. And very few people ask, how are you going to pay for it? But when someone like me says, well, let us have universal health care. How are we going to pay for it? Let us deal with the homelessness in this country. How are we going to pay for it? But not a lot of how we going to pay for it when it comes to war. My third point is the nerve of us. On this day, which is Juneteenth, which my ancestors recognized when the last enslaved people technically found out 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, that they were in fact really free. The nerve of the United States to look on any other nation and be a judge, juror, and executioner of any nation. So if we're really gonna do this thing right, then we should be pushing for peace and diplomacy and learn from our own history and be that kind of guiding light. But to try to be a light and tell another sovereign nation what they can do, if Iran was saying we're gonna take out President Trump, if they declared that right now, how would we feel as Americans? I would not feel good about that, but yet we can sit up here and talk about taking out leaders of another nation.
So I think it's funny because
they did
I
try
think
to assassinate Donald Trump last
And I
year.
didn't like
That
it.
is-
did. But also, Nina, you've got two conservatives here, me and Emma Jo, who both would probably support Medicare for all. So we're happy to see that point that there's a lot of stuff here we should be paying for. Emma, I want you to respond to what Nina just said. There was a clip of Whoopi Goldberg saying also something similar. We don't have the authority as Americans to criticize the Iranians for their treatment of women because of our history.
Oh my God.
What's your reaction to that?
I think it's so outrageous. I think that's so outrageous. Obviously, there are horrifically dark periods in our history. I would never say otherwise. But also, we led the world and the civilized world in abolishing that horrific and disgusting practice. We have the most remarkable human rights situation in the world right now, which is where we are right now, to make some sort of moral relativist case between the United States and Iran is I disagree completely. It's like actually makes my head spin. I can't believe you could make that claim, Nina. I mean, come on.
Look, you making
Come
my
on.
head, so I'm about to start throwing papers now because I cannot take this. Wow. I hope we have a whole show over this.
You think that the United States doesn't have the moral authority to
First of all, the
pass
United
judgment
States-
on Iran?
The United States of America did not abolish slavery first, my dear. They did not. And even to this day, African Americans are still bearing the brunt of that cycle of violence on our bodies to this very day. It was not the moral clarity of the United States of America at all. I mean, hell, the Emancipation Proclamation only freed the enslaved people in the states in rebellion. There were border states that were allowed to continue to keep their enslaved people. So this is for another show.
Yeah. Let's stay on topic. Emma, specifically about this question of like having like this from your point of view, when we say that we're just not going to accept a nuclear Iran, explain why to you that doesn't equate with sending US soldiers to die in a war that is not our war. Like, just respond to that exact thing.
You're asking me why I don't think that we have to have boots on the ground just because we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon?
Right, exactly. Yeah, because I don't think that is sort of what is in the main. I mean, obviously Ted Cruz,
because you can break their stuff from the air. That's what we've been seeing for the last week, is we are just trying to break their weapons. We're trying to make them not work. We're trying to make them unable to develop them, unable to work them, and unable to operate them. That's all we're trying to do. And then also, Israel is killing their scientists, which are the ones who know how to do those things. So but really, we're breaking infrastructure. That's all we're doing. And you can do that from the air. And apparently, according to Trump, which was a very funny little word.
Very loaded.
We have control over Iranian skies, which that seems to be true. So if that's the case, I don't understand. Like, it's not a binary. There's tons of ways to accomplish a military objective, and they don't always necessarily need to include human beings physically going to the country. They also those objectives don't always need to necessarily be displacing the government. And I don't think that Trump is going there. Like, I know that this conversation keeps like drifting there, and maybe my brain is too tiny to fully understand why us just not wanting to have facilities that can make nukes means regime change. But I don't go there in my mind, and I do not think Trump does either. I mean, why else would he be saying Iran can't have a nuke for the last 10 years while simultaneously also being opposed to regime change wars, unless he saw a distinction between those two objectives?
But
I also want to just, I do want to just add that, Nina, I disagree with you a little bit that Iran is our enemy. Like, not only did they blow up a barracks, but we have to remember in the Iraq war, when the Iraqi government, unfortunately, of the United States disbanded the military and the police and the civil service, it was the Iranian intelligence that came rushing in with cash, IED explosives, and everything else to kill American soldiers. Like, they are not our friend. They have been a huge enemy. Now, you're right. Right now, they don't necessarily have the technology to get missiles to us. But do I think if they had nuclear weapons, they would not potentially think about hitting our assets in the region? Like, I think we do have to remember, and whether or not we should proactively attack it is a great debate. But I would not, along the lines of what Emma Jo said, equate morally the United States and Iran. They are bad people.
Peter, let's bring in Peter.
I am not defending Iran, so don't conflate that. What I am defending is humanity. And so for all the people in the chat saying I'm auditioning for The View and all these little snarky comments,
I think you'd be great on The View.
I am a human. I would
couldn't be worse than what they have now. For The View to have you.
Yes,
my friend.
Have me on The View.
You can't go to The View because you're on two-way. You're ours.
That's right, Emma Jo. I am a humanitarian first. I am defending American citizens, and I am not defending Iran. My other point that I need to make, America has no moral authority, but that does not mean that we don't have a responsibility to be an honest actor. I don't believe that we are, because we have engaged and continue to engage in regime changes, wars. I mean, what's happening in the Gaza, by way of example, is being abetted by the United States of America. So things can be different, but we cannot go to other nations with some type of moral high ground is my major point here.
Peter, tell us where you're calling in from and what's on your mind.
Calling in from Northern California. What's on my mind is, I feel honestly a lot better today than I did a few days ago that this will potentially not be a major escalation, given that the statements that came from Caroline Leavitt about, 2 weeks. And that's because I think that while while it all sounds good in theory that, oh, we'll just do a strike and, take out Fordo, I don't believe it'll end there. And I think that you're already seeing, that like the rhetoric from Netanyahu and the Israelis has already started to escalate into like from initially like just taking out the nuclear program to wanting regime change. You see that as well from like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and others. And I think that if the regime falls, and I think that Sohrab Ahmari had a really good and who is an Iranian exile himself, had a very good and detailed piece in Unheard about this, basically laying out the case that we won't be able, if the regime is taken out, we won't be able to avoid getting brought in, even if we don't want to. And I found that very persuasive. I believe also, and I think I was trying to track this down because I saw it on X right before the show started, but I couldn't track down the primary source for it. But if what I saw is correct, then even in the last hour or so, Netanyahu himself basically acknowledged what should have been obvious, that the Israelis have contingency plans for Fordo in the event that we were to not take it out for them with bunker busters, which, by the way, as clear, it's not 100%, it's not certain that we could even do that. Yeah. I believe the articles talking about the questions that the president has for his advisors are getting at. And I also think there's something that's been really troubling to me that's been going on in the last several days, which is that I think that there's, say what you will, whatever side you're on in the Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz discussion, at least that was an open discussion where you had two different points of view that were talking it out in the public. What I think is going on in the media is there has been a series of articles relying on anonymous sources, both within the U.S. military establishment as well as Israeli sources, to attempt to discredit people like Tulsi Gabbard, Elbridge Colby, and others within the administration who have a less hawkish stance on this. I've seen, there's multiple articles saying, Tulsi's not being, not part of the team. Elbridge Colby, who's the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, essentially the number 3 at the Pentagon, he's holding up assets being transferred to the Middle East. Then you have people like Mark Levin jumping on that and saying these people should be fired. I think that that's a very dangerous thing that's going on here. And, I think that, I wish we hadn't gotten to this point. That there's a certain point where it's like, the cat's out of the bag and the thing is to just triage as best you can. But I do think that ultimately they may want us to get involved. They may prefer it, but the Israelis have the means to accomplish this goal if they need to without us. And I think that's what they should do if they feel that that's what they need to do. And I don't think it would ultimately end well for us to do it.
Can I echo Peter's point there? Very strong. Yes, I agree with basically everything you just said. I think the piece by Sohrab Ahmari was very good, and I'm someone who's very critical of Sohrab Ahmari. I guess I agree with him on foreign policy. It was a great piece. Yes, the people who are making arguments for doing more just in general, government should do more, I dislike, and this happens often, when they rely on pieces of intelligence or expertise that are too secret to be shared with you, the lowly citizen, and mainstream media often takes those things at face value without looking much more closely. There's some intelligence briefing that we can't share with you, but just trust us. This is a good idea. We know. That's even had some stock during COVID when experts are looking at projections that you just don't understand. So we have to have all these policies to prevent it that we now have come to regret. By the way, this is just a general point. I am so thankful that we have the alternative media right now, where there is a much wider range of views being able to be expressed. Joe Rogan, Theo Von, Tucker Carlson, etc. Those are platforms where people who dissent from this action are allowed to speak. Whereas you contrast with the Iraq War, and you had a much narrower range of permissible views. I mean, the mainstream media was a tremendous platform for those who wanted regime change in Iraq. There was not an ability to dissent because they had such a power to set the terms of the conversation. That doesn't take place anymore. And I think it's a very good and healthy thing. And I think what's happening in that world is healthy. The debate is good.
I'm about to do something you really don't like. You just said you don't like Robby, but my sources, who I cannot reveal, have told me that the narrative about Tulsi being sidelined is not true and not accurate. So I was very happy to hear that as a big fan of Tulsi Gabbard and her dovishness in particular. On the Israeli rhetoric, Peter, which obviously I follow very closely, it's my feeling that they've really
And I
shifted
agree,
their
by the way,
rhetoric.
that it's not in I find that in these articles often they bury the lead. There's like countervailing information to what certain sources are saying.
Right, right.
So yeah.
So on the Israeli rhetoric, I have actually been really shocked by how little they are doing in terms of outright moral manipulation. There's been a lot of, well, the president has to do what's right for the American people. I've been hearing that a lot more from Israelis than I've heard in my entire lifetime. So I think that is what makes this moment very unique. And Robby, in terms of the independent media, I agree with you. Of course, the more the merrier. But I think that there was this false feeling that like the real MAGA feeling and sentiment, this kind of anti-war beating heart of Trump's foreign policy was being expressed by people like Theo Von and Tucker Carlson and other people who are like them, very anti-Israel and even more so. And I think what Trump has revealed is that that's actually not where the energy of the base is. The energy of the base is with him. And honestly, y'all are haters because y'all are admitting that, we want like the best way to achieve a goal that most of us want, Iran not having a nuclear weapon, is to start and do the best you can with negotiations. And when that doesn't work, to take your time and not rush into war. And when that doesn't work, to be very careful and not endanger American service members. Well, guess what? Somebody just pulled all that off, and none of you will rate him higher than a 5.
But wait,
You're haters.
Well, we don't know if he pulled
I
it
gotta
off.
respond to that. I
Yeah.
agree. Yes, the
Yes.
base is with Trump, but you can't say this is demonstrating. If Trump has not himself made up his mind.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
he's
that's
still
it.
deciding.
But
so
that
you
is
can't.
literally what you were calling for, is let's not rush into this. Let's take our time. Let's see if the Israelis can do it without us. By the way, Peter, you're so right. How can you bomb a nuclear site and then what, you're just going to leave the enriched uranium there, like for someone to steal? Like, obviously, if we bomb Fordo, we're going to have to go in with soldiers and boots on the ground and take out that enriched uranium. You can't just leave it in the mountain. Like, so Dan, jump in here.
Well,
Batya has entered the chat.
Yeah, yes, exactly. For all those who don't like Batya just moderating, but want to hear her point of view, of which there are many, including me, like Batya, awesome. Look, I think Robby made the point. One, it's incomplete, but two, look, part of this is Trump mocked Barack Obama for doing exactly like what he ultimately did, which was a deal to avoid going in, right, for all the reasons that we just laid out, right? And part of, like, on so many instances in Trump, what I'll call 3.0 now, is that positions he took in 2015, he's come almost 180 degrees on. And so now here he is, right? On the one hand, he wants to like take credit for what Israel's done, said that, we provided all this support. They can't have the weapon. But by the same token, I think you and Emma Jo and others have said this, like he is cautious. He does not want war. I think he's terrified that, like, you own this. There is no one to blame. Like, he loves to be with a winner. He loves to be projecting strength and control and dominance. And he is staring at a region of the world where no one in the history of the world has controlled and dominated it. And I think he is appropriately scared. Like, I'm glad the president of the United States is scared about starting a war with Iran or joining a war with Iran.
I mean,
so, we don't know what he's going to decide. But he's kind of ping-pong and zigzagged all over the place. But the middle ground is he's just kind of inching forward.
And yeah, it's true that 35% of voters will side with Trump no matter what, and that's fine. But you have to acknowledge, Batya, that there are some people, he just took in a lot of Gen Z young males who swung in his direction. They were not with him initially. They got behind him in parts because of the pitch he made to them specifically on the platforms they prefer, the communications methods they like, Joe Rogan, Theo Von, Tucker Carlson, etc. It was a pitch to them. aligned with their interests. These people, they have some independent minds about them. Some of them will support him no matter what. Yes, they're in the team. But I think if he does this, contrary to what their expectations are, he's going to lose some level of support.
100%.
This category.
I'm not denying that. I'm just saying I don't think there's another politician in America alive today who could have withstood the conflicting pressure and said, actually, I'm going to do whatever I can to protect the American people and not go to war. What we're seeing right now is
I disagree with that.
Oh, really? Who? Dan, I would love to know.
I mean, Batya, we haven't gone to war with Iran now for the last 6 presidents for this exact reason. I mean, whether it was Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush, who had all the neocons who wanted to go into Iran, Dick Cheney, Barack Obama resisted, Trump in his first term, Joe Biden, they've all resisted this. There is a reason we have not gone to war with them.
Peter, thank you so much.
I would also, one last point.
Go ahead, Peter.
I think that there is a bit of a two-way street in the reason why we haven't gone to war with them. And what I'll say is that while I do not doubt that the Islamic Republic has a very anti-American ideology, there's no question of that. When the chips are down, when it comes to the U.S., the actions often don't live up to the rhetoric. For example, and they've taken actions against us. There's no in Iraq, in the 80s in Lebanon. There's no question. But when we took out Soleimani, the retaliation was essentially symbolic. And despite the fact that in this last week, their rhetoric has been blaming us together with the Israelis, they have not targeted American assets. So I think, again, definitely agree that they are hostile ideologically, very much so, to the U.S., but the idea that they're just suicidally irrational, I just think is not borne out by the facts.
No, in fact, I agree with you, Peter. It seems to me like Khomeini has been sort of sidelined in his bunker where he's sitting there and the only thing he has left to do is tweet, because it does seem like, you've got these flights going in and out of Oman.
Obviously, we don't know for sure, but
I mean,
fog of war, but it is, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Peter. Let's bring in one more caller, Matthew. Hi, Matthew. Unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about where you are and what's on your mind.
No, wait, Matthew, you unmuted and then muted. There you go.
I unmute. Okay, thank you. So I think one of the problems with this debate, and I don't want to get too emotional, is what I discern to be a deep undercurrent of anti-Semitism that has informed it on both sides of the political spectrum. And there's a whole history in the United States in the populist movement that goes all the way back to Charles Lindbergh about talking about how the Jews are bringing this country and forcing this country into war. If you know anything about Charles Lindbergh, he said, which is the origin of the America First movement, he in 1941 accused the Roosevelt administration, the British and the Jews of dragging the country into war. This is a trope that was then repeated by Patrick Buchanan before the first Gulf War about only 2 groups banging the drums for war, the Israeli Defense Ministry and their Amen corner in Congress. This was another trope that he used again in 2003 in front of the Gulf War about the people fighting the war, whose names would be McAllister and Jones and Rodriguez. And then he listed the names of people who were the editors at leading publications who were calling for that war, all of whose names were Jewish. And now I hear, online, both on the left and on the right, once again, the same kinds of argument about Netanyahu and AIPAC dragging this country into war. It's deeply disturbing, particularly given the context at the moment, but there's something profoundly flawed about its entire political conception. The reason why America stands with Israel, wholly apart from the geostrategic interests, is a deep thread of Christian Zionism in this country that goes all the way back to the 1880s, when Jews in this country were actually more against Zionism than they were for Zionism. The people that were most in favor of Zionism were Christian Zionists in this country. But Another thing is about the geostrategic interest here and about the dangers to the United States. I don't expect American boots on the ground. I don't want anyone dying for Israel. One of the principles of Zionism, as you know, Batya, is of self-determination and about them fighting the wars for themselves by themselves. But one of the things that's important here, apart from the fact that this regime took hostages in 1979, apart from the fact that they're responsible for the Beirut bombing, apart from the fact that most recently they actually killed American soldiers in Iraq, there's something even more disturbing about this regime. This is a messianic regime that believes, and it's first of all in two goals. First of all, to export its revolution abroad. That is something fundamental. It is very much like the Soviet Union and the Nazi regime in Germany, and because it designs to export its revolution beyond its borders. You see this with the Ring of Fire that they've caused surrounding Israel. It's not just a threat to Israel and all of our Arab allies and to the entire Gulf region and to the possibilities of the new Middle East. It is also a threat to the United States because of the possibility of them working with terrorists and giving them nuclear weapons.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Emma, I want you to reply to that. You're on the populist right. Do you sense that in the spaces that you're in, that some of this kind of Israel's dragging us to war has like an anti-Jewish sentiment to it? How do you respond to Matthew's comments?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm Jewish and I'm very much supportive of MAGA. And my Judaism is very important to me as an individual, and I'm highly sensitive about it, just in terms of myself and with the people around me and whatever, and the political movements I join. But listen, that claim is coming from a lot of people. I can't begin to parse and analyze what they mean when they say it. I think that there are some anti-Semitic people, perhaps a lot of anti-Semitic people, or not. And I think that people are coming from where they're coming from as individuals. I don't think that the MAGA movement is anti-Semitic. No, is the short answer to that question. And I think that a lot of people who criticize Israel perhaps are anti-Semitic. And I think that a lot of people who criticize Israel are not. And that's on the left and the right. And it's in the populist movement and it's in the establishments as well. I can't begin to know the heart of everybody criticizing the government of Israel. And I don't think that you can blanketly say that they're all anti-Semitic. I also don't think you can write it off as nothing either.
Yeah, I agree with Emma and Matthew. I do think that you have to, though, acknowledge the reason that we are considering this is that Netanyahu has asked for our help, right? He has asked for our bunker busters to take out Fedora. So he's asked for our intelligence assets. He's asked for our refueling. So we have a shared goal. They don't have nuclear weapons. But part of the reason the conversation is that, Israel is, quote, dragging us into this is they have asked for us to join them.
I do think there is more, speaking for myself, more anti-Semitism out there on the left and right than I was willing to admit several years ago. I'm someone who grew up, I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't know a lot of Jewish people growing up. I went to Catholic school. I didn't know any Jewish people until I went to college. I was very unfamiliar with anti-Semitism. To me, that was like a crazy idea. Like, there's anti-Semitism? What? Didn't we defeat that like in World War II? I was totally unaware of it, honestly. And I was inclined to discount it when I was told it was really bad still. And I've been surprised in recent years. I see it online. I acknowledge that there is a strain of it still with us and maybe rising that I think is very bad. But I think it is so important to separate. They overlap, certainly, but anti-Semitism, which is just universally wrong, and criticisms, not even of Israel, but of its particular government and its strategies, which is the privilege of every American and every person on earth to be able to criticize them, just as I'm not anti-American for criticizing the US government, as I do all the time.
Nina?
Exactly. I mean, Robby hit the nail on the head. Any type of hate, whether it's anti-Blackness, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, all of that. None of that stuff is good. But there is a difference between the Israeli government and people critiquing Netanyahu and being against the Jewish people, which is wrong just because they are Jewish. And the person, that you all know that I champion to be the president of the United States of America, Senator Bernie Sanders, he is out there very strongly talking about Netanyahu's illegal unilateral attack on Iran. Now, he's one voice. Certainly, he doesn't speak for all Jewish people. I lay that out there. But it is very clear. We got to be clear about that. Anti-Semitism, wrong. But being able to critique a right-wing government, anybody's right-wing government, should not be conflated with being anti-Semitic. I agree with Emma Jo that I don't believe that the majority of MAGA is either. And I don't believe that the majority of the people who are just asking fairly, Israel attacked Iran, and now the United States is being pulled in. If somebody asks that question or kind of, just follow the facts so far, that does not in and of itself make them anti-Semitic. And we should never, ever conflate those two things. I'm against all types of hate.
Well, on that note, something we can all agree on. Thank you all so much for joining us. Please like and subscribe and come back next week, 4 p.m. Thursday for the group chat on 2A. We'll see you then.
Thanks all.
Thank you.